No being from folklore has had a bigger impact on the internet than that of the Skinwalkers. Skinwalkers are a creature that has its origin in folklore, more so than being a cryptid. The internet, though, is obsessed with them, and there have been numerous stories posted online. Just about every website has a section for Skinwalker stories, sightings, and the like. The origin of the Skinwalker goes back to the Navajo people. In Navajo culture, Skinwalkers are a type of evil witch that uses the skins of animals to become said animal. This is where the name Skinwalker comes from. There is a word for Skinwalker in Navajo, which I'll put on screen now. It means, with it, he goes on all fours. This is referring to the skin that they wear, allowing them to become animals. Skinwalkers exist as an antithesis of the Navajo people. They often represent aspects of the Navajo culture that are considered taboo or evil. This is also why they represent the dark side of magic, and are the opposite of those that use magic for healing properties and healing others in the community. As far as the animals that Skinwalkers can become, it's unlimited. As long as they wear its skin, they may become that animal. Usually they take the form of coyotes, wolves, foxes, cougars, dogs, and bears. All of these animals have something in common. They are all carnivorous hunters. These animals are often chosen for their strength, speed, and ability to catch and kill their prey. Skinwalkers can easily blend into the community. During the day, they might even pretend to be a respected elder or healer. By night, they become what they truly are: predators and practitioners in the dark arts. Because of this, Skinwalkers can also be considered a wolf in sheep's clothing metaphor, and can also sow chaos in different communities. For those that may want to become a Skinwalker, it can only be done if you were initiated into it by others with those abilities already. A secret society is formed, and to join it you must commit the most vile of acts. This is usually the murder of a close family member, often a sibling, or a close friend. This ultimate act of evil taints the soul and forever marks it. After the act is done, the individual is said to gain supernatural powers. This again is done with the skins of said animals, but they can also wear the skulls or antlers of different animals to increase their power. While in their animal form, it's the most likely time you'll notice them. Their eyes are immediately identifiable from others of their kind. Skinwalkers are said to retain their human eyes even while in an animal form, and inversely, their eyes appear more animal while in human form. They also just appear to be off in some way, likely similar to the knot deer, which is a cryptid that is like a deer but off in a way that defies explanation. Skinwalkers often hold secret ceremonies in dark or secluded places. These ceremonies are held to induct new members, plan their activities, conduct dark magic and curses, and to perform ceremonial rites. The ceremonial rites include dancing, feasts, rituals, and sand painting. Of course, every rite is corrupted with dark connotations. This is also where the taboo acts are committed, including necrophilia, cannibalism, incest, and grave robbing. These acts are all against the beliefs of the Navajo and other Pueblo Native Americans. Skinwalkers are seen as a blight on the Navajo community, as much as they are part of their culture. This blight is one that has led to a few burnings of those that might be considered Skinwalkers over the years. The largest being from the Navajo Witch Purge of 1878. The Navajo people had just gotten their land back from the US, and immediately they found witchcraft artifacts in one of their camps. This led to the murder of 40 suspected witches or Skinwalkers. This is about all we're allowed to know about Skinwalkers. The tradition and how to actually obtain such power are closely guarded secrets. The Navajo are rather reluctant to talk with outsiders about them, and it's even considered bad luck or dangerous to talk about them in general. The name alone is said to bring about misfortune or their attention. This hasn't stopped the internet from latching onto this particular being and turning it into a piece of internet folklore. The internet loves to tell stories as much as any other group. The main difference is how these stories are told. In this case, mainly through message boards and videos. This trend really began in the early 2010s on a website we've covered more times than I can count, 4chan. 4chan's paranormal board loved Skinwalker stories, and this is where many of them started. There are whole threads dedicated to Skinwalker encounters and sightings, but sadly a lot of those are gone. Still, some of these threads were archived and most of them were told through the green text format. Most of these green texts were posted onto the aforementioned X paranormal board, but also onto K. This green text is called Nope, Skinwalker, Goatman. With that title, it feels more like a Goatman story. The Goatman is a popular cryptid that many like to compare to the Skinwalker, and oftentimes get lore pieces mixed together. The story itself tells of a pair of teens going camping in the woods to record a home movie. It's essentially a slasher film they thought would be fun to do. They arrive, record, and set up camp only to be hit with what smells like rotten milk mixed with vomit. They also notice some of their food has been stolen. The first night is nothing unexpected, but on the morning of day 2, OP decides to go exploring in the woods with one of his friends, while the third friend sleeps in his tent. While exploring, OP's friend, Chris, asks if he heard the screaming and giggling coming from the woods last night. He says he must have been heavily sleeping because he can't say that he does. They decide it was a mixture of a fox and their imaginations and continue on. On day 3, OP wakes up before his friends and decides to go for a walk in the woods. While there, he finds a dead bird and feels like he's being watched. Turning around, he sees a dark figure standing about 100 feet away. He hears faint giggling somewhere behind him and takes off running. OP meets back up with his friends and explains what he saw. The trio decide to not record that day and stay in their camping area. Later, they decide they need firewood after getting a little drunk. Sean, who is a bit more adventurous than the other two, says he'll go grab it. A half hour passes and he returns with no firewood, covered in dirt, and doesn't say a word to the other two. They ask him questions, to which he smirks and stares at the dying fire. Finally, before going to bed, the OP asks why he never came back with firewood, to which he responds, "Want to go get some with me?" His voice sounded off, and this was enough for OP to decline and head for his tent. He couldn't sleep though, and instead just listened for Sean to go to sleep. The tent was never opened though, not during the entire night. OP finally dozed off and woke up in the early morning to find Sean missing and his tent untouched. Chris awoke a few minutes later and asked what happened the night before. The pair had no idea where Sean was and decided they would just wait and see if he showed up. Chris said he needed to pee and left to go into the woods. This left OP alone at the campsite. This only lasted for a little while before he noticed a tall creature at the edge of the woods. It appeared to be crouching down and was covered in the shadows of the trees. While examining it, Chris came running out of the woods with a gash in his face and told OP to run for it. The two made their way to the car, leaving everything behind including their camera. As they were running, they could hear something calling for them using a distorted version of their friend's voice. They made it to the car, sped down the trail, and eventually made it to the highway. The pair reported everything to the police and a search was started. The oddest thing happened though. They went to tell the parents of their friend Sean that he was missing, only to have Sean answer the door, confused as what they were talking about. He claimed to have never been on that trip in the first place. A few things to know about this story is that there are a bit of differentiating factors at play here. Skinwalkers have never been said to have a foul smell, but that can be assumed based on the cannibalism and death they surround themselves in. Of course, another popular creature was associated with the smell, that being the Goatman. The Goatman is a creature that comes from Native American folklore and was used in one of the most popular green text stories, Anansi's Goatman story. The smell of iron, blood, and rot were popular with Goatman sightings. The same can be said of the human mimicry and voice mimicry. These are also abilities attached to other similar creatures such as Wendigos, which I'll probably cover in a full video at a later date. Also, if you want to hear an analysis of the Goatman story as well as a retelling, I have that on my channel already. The important thing to note here is how the internet was adapting aspects from all the variations of skinwalkers and other related creatures. Human mimicry, in both appearance and voice, was common among differing tribes, but were now starting to mix together in these online retellings. This was a sign of the lore starting to adapt to what the internet was truly afraid of. There are thousands of stories similar to the one I just told. A group or even a single person goes hiking or camping in the woods, smells something awful, and sees something in the tree line. The most disturbing part by far, though, is hearing the voice of a friend or loved one, but not sounding quite like a human. Almost like a dog learning human speech. Other stories will have people screaming for help from the woods. Usually this comes in the form of children or hunters claiming to have been caught in a bear trap. These almost always lead to something else making the sound, though. 4chan wasn't the only website getting in on the horror of skinwalkers. Reddit had a whole board created for these encounters to be retold. r/Skinwalkers was created in 2013 and hosts some of the same stories found on 4chan, as well as plenty of community-submitted content. The About section for the community reads, a place to post experiences, thoughts, or stories you have found about skinwalkers and similar encounters. This is a great place to start if you know nothing about the plethora of skinwalker stories. This is also the place if you want a community to help you if you've had your own experiences to share. Top posts include videos of supposed sightings, stories relating to skinwalker encounters, and an AI trying to create what a skinwalker might look like. I'll tackle these in order, save for the AI images, which I'll show a bit of now. There are loads of sightings on trail cams, recorded by someone running through the woods, or from someone's home security system. A lot of these are freaky videos, especially if in a dark place all alone while watching them. The videos themselves don't appear to be anything more than poor footage of animals or people acting strange. Of course, skinwalkers can be animals, so it's not entirely impossible to have a skinwalker appear as an animal that is acting a bit different. The clearest giveaway for a skinwalker is that it would act different when in animal form, so these videos could be sightings. The stories on the subreddit are your standard fare and very similar to 4chan's skinwalker encounters, the biggest difference being how the stories are presented. 4chan mainly uses green text to tell their stories, while Reddit prefers a more standard writing style. The highest upvoted skinwalker story was a repost from a post on r/Reddit. This post reads, my wife and I were driving up through northern Arizona on Highway 89 between Flagstaff and Page. It was about 1 a.m. as we were on our third shift at the time and often drove at night to avoid traffic. I saw a few sets of eyes glowing in my headlights a little ways up the road, so I let off the gas, slowing down to avoid hitting an animal in the road. When we drove by, we saw several dogs, coyotes possibly, on the side of the road, and I hit the gas and drove by. After we passed, my wife said one of them was running next to the car, and I looked over and saw it as well, probably 20 feet off the shoulder of the road. I floored it and looked over, and it stood up on its hind legs. That's the only way I can describe it, and kept pace with us for a couple seconds before turning away from the road and disappearing. This whole event probably lasted no more than 10 seconds, but it was seriously the most terrifying 10 seconds of my life. This was probably 20 years ago, and we still rarely talk about it. While exploring the rabbit hole of skinwalkers, you'll find a lot of stories that read just like this one. It is said that the most likely place to find a skinwalker is while driving, on a lonely, desolate road at night. This is when most reports of skinwalkers take place. People say that they'll see a vaguely animal-like shape moving either in front of or beside their vehicle. It'll appear to keep up for a while, even if you were to speed up. Then, almost randomly, it would dart off into the woods, never to be seen again. Some have said that they heard the voices of loved ones while it tracked their vehicle, and others claimed to have seen scratch marks on their doors or roofs. The next highest upvoted story is from AVI Throwaway, and is a 3-parter. It's about OP's friend who used to live on a Navajo reservation. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. The story is about why his friend left the reservation. OP starts by saying that this story is not his. It actually is a retelling of a story from his friend, who we will call Sam. Sam is a full Navajo, but due to a divorce, actually grew up in Chicago. Eventually, he would move in with his dad on a Navajo reservation. Here he would meet his girlfriend, Jess, and her uncle John. Sam wanted to get in touch with his ancestry, since he was raised Catholic and nowhere near his culture. He would do this by doing work around the house for John and having the older man tell him about their culture in exchange. OP makes it very clear that Sam and him are both big fans of the paranormal. In fact, that's how they became friends. They were both artists in different fields, but that brought them together. Eventually, Sam got the courage to ask John about skinwalkers. This led to a small argument, and his stating that they weren't supposed to talk about that. This would also lead to another argument with his girlfriend, her saying that he isn't really Navajo, so he shouldn't talk about such things. The story continued with years of Sam working for John, that eventually led to him talking about other aspects of the culture. Until one day, he decided he was ready to tell him a little bit about skinwalkers. This was mainly him telling him about people who pretended to be skinwalkers to scare other members of the community. Sam was relaying all this to OP through text. This was essentially supposed to dissuade Sam from asking any more questions about them. He was told about where they came from and why people did the things they did. As John's health was declining, he called Sam over one more time. He wanted to tell him the true story of the Skinwalkers, how they essentially did exactly what we talked about before: animal abilities, human voice mimicry, and variations of mind control. He also explained how and why they did what they did. John said that Skinwalkers had formed their own communities separate from the rest of the Navajo. They had to do some dark deeds in order to get their powers, and they fed mostly off of human fear, which is why they stuck so close to reservations, so they could continue to strike fear into the community and feed themselves. This is also where he explains that the true stories of the Skinwalkers are known only amongst other Skinwalkers. He does know a few more details though. Their scent comes from the hide of the animals they kill. Usually they'll let the flesh start to decay before fusing with them. This is to give them a more rotted look, to strike fear into those that witness them. This is also what gives them the scent of decay that is reported in so many stories. John explains that Skinwalkers are very protective of their identities. There once was an old woman that was very much an outsider who would make her way into town and just watch people. It was believed that she was a Skinwalker, but no one could prove it. One day, while a couple is out of town, the wife spots the old woman staring at them through a window. She alerts her husband, as it was odd that the woman could be there, especially since she didn't own a car. Later that night, while driving home from the restaurant, they see a wounded coyote laying in the road. As the husband stops his car to look at it, the wife stops him as she sees the coyote is looking at her with the same eyes as the old woman. The two drive off just as the coyote runs off on its hind legs. A few days later, the old woman was found dead near her home. It was said that she had a heart attack and died making her way towards town. This was the official story, but John had heard the real one. The woman had been found dead with bite marks from various animals taken out of her. Her flesh looked old and rotted, as if it was likely she had lived longer than most due to her Skinwalker powers and dealings with the demons required for such things. John explains that the couple had started telling the town that the woman was a Skinwalker, and before she could be investigated, she was found dead. If the community ever finds out what you are, the others in your pack will take care of the problem, as their identities being known weakens them enough to be killed. Skinwalkers are mostly killed by other Skinwalkers. Sam leaves John with the stories that he was told and receives a phone call a few days later. He says not to come by his place for a few days. Something is happening, and he doesn't want his niece or him to be part of it. Sam doesn't get a chance to respond before he hangs up. That would be the last time that he ever heard from John, as he died a few days later in the hospital from a heart attack. Sam relays what happened to Jess, and the pair agree to never talk of it again. This is when the weirdness starts, though. While staying at Jess's house, the family start to hear coyotes at all hours of the night. They sound normal, until they got closer. Then they sounded wrong. Just so ever faintly wrong. Livestock would also come up dead, completely mutilated, but not eaten. This continued for a while, until their house got blessed. Then, the weird howlings and activity would continue at Sam's house. First the howls of the wolves, then scratching, and finally one night, he would find both his back and front doors wide open. The final straw was a strange dream that Sam had. He dreamed of 6 people, well, hardly people. They were all ashen in color and wore different animal pelts. They also had animal skulls atop their heads, each with differing levels of decomposition attached. They just stared at him, as he couldn't move and couldn't wake up. The next day he awoke to his house being cold and smelling of rot. When he went outside, he found 5 sets of footprints, but couldn't find the 6th to coincide with his dream. This is when he decided he needed to move, which he did back to Chicago. He took Jess with him, and the two make occasional trips back to the res, but never for long. Their families missed them, but so too did the Skinwalkers. This story corroborates a lot of other stories we've heard so far. There are thousands of stories similar online actually. This one goes a step further and explains a few of the features that we were missing from other stories. Whether this story or any of the ones told online are true or not is kind of up to each person to believe. I will say that this story appeared on the subreddit in 2021, which is when the search results for Skinwalkers had reached its all-time peak thanks to our next topic, TikTok. This might sound odd, but TikTok has a habit of recycling trends. Like the Skinwalker phenomenon on the internet was popular in the early 2010s, but has just now taken off again starting in late 2020. It all started with this video by That One Cowboy, which has amassed a total of 12.6 million views and 1.8 million likes. The video shows a man on his horse while something odd can be heard in the background. The voice appears to be saying, "Hey." The man seems confused, and only lasts for a few seconds before his horse turns around and starts running in the opposite direction. This video started a trend on TikTok of people filming creepy noises and claiming skinwalkers were involved. These videos range from deer looking and acting odd to dogs and other pets behaving weird. One of the most popular and the first TikTok I saw referencing skinwalkers was this video by Che-Jim. I'll let the videos play out since there are 3 of them. These videos are a perfect representation of signs that a skinwalker is close. This video, along with the plethora of other sightings, would bring skinwalkers into the forefront of people's minds. It would also bring skinwalkers back into the internet's subconscious. This was the internet's obsession with skinwalkers, but media itself has had an obsession as well. The first time the skinwalker appeared in media was with the X-Files in 1994. This one kept it vague, but also somewhat close to that original folklore. Other representations would hardly do so. The skinwalker would appear in movies, books, and other works and be constantly mixed with the Wendigo lore and werewolves as well. The media didn't care for proper representations of the folklore, but neither really did the internet for the most part. Lost Tapes was likely the closest to the actual lore, and it was a mockumentary show created by Animal Planet. There was also an SCP based off the skinwalker, but it's not entirely worth talking about here. The last major inclusion I wanted to talk about was an ARG by the name of Gemini Home Entertainment. This ARG has a creature in it called a skinwalker, but it's not really all that similar to the Navajo legend. The Skinwalker in Gemini is more like an alien spider creature that harvests humans and creates replicas of them. I would love to dive more into this ARG, but that's best saved for another time. Lastly, I want to talk about what an encounter with a Skinwalker in modern times is like. Imagine you live in a house that's 20 minutes or so from the closest town. You have neighbors, but they live at least a 10-minute walk away. Your parents or roommates have left to go into town for some late night shopping. You decided not to go as you had homework to do or just were feeling like relaxing at home. There's nothing there but the sound of the wilderness outside and whatever you happen to be working on. Next thing you know, there's silence, like every bug, animal, and bird in the vicinity has just vacated the area. You don't find this odd at first, but then you hear it, a knocking at your door. It sounds like maybe one of your family members forgot their key or something. But before you can respond, you hear a tapping at the window. All of your windows are closed and locked, luckily. As you turn to look, you see nothing there. Perplexed and slightly scared now, you start to check to make sure all of the other doors are locked. You wander around the house and notice scratching noises. It's either coming from your roof or your walls. You can't really tell, likely because it's from multiple sources. Finally, you walk around your house one last time, trying to find some safety. And there it is. Staring at you from your closed window is a form. As soon as you notice it, it's gone, back into the woods near your home. You just had your own Skinwalker encounter. You can't really tell your friends or family. You never stay home alone again though, for fear that they may come back.